here is Mr. Szigeti in person, sitting across the table opposite me. Mr. Szigeti, my first question is this. How intuitive an artist would you say you were? Or have you always known exactly how and why you played the way you did?
I wouldn't say that I have always known it. Probably I did things mostly instinctively and just in the natural course of events. I mean, I learned a great deal from conductors. That is perhaps something that separates me from many of my colleagues. That I learned a great deal from Arthur Schnabel, from Bruno Walter, from Klemperer, from all these men with whom I played. This is now is the time to draw conclusions.
I remember at Dartington, one of the great points you made was what I might call a sort of creative fingering.
Yes, because it is the lifeblood of performance. And what I try to convey to the young people there also is that we must look for the line of most resistance. As our friend Schnabel said, he called a little book of his the line of most resistance.
But didn't Busoni say the same thing about practicing? Always start off with the most difficult fingering, and then after that, anything else is bound to seem easier.
Fingerings compel certain expression. And it is this faculty of drawing out of our musical treasures the maximum of expressiveness and of character and of eloquence that seems to me to be missing nowadays in the superb playing we are surrounded by, because I suppose technique has never been more smooth and more infallible than in our days. But what I miss is precisely this element of risk, the element of having convictions and daring to convey them. To compare performances like this is a very big job. I may say that in view of the young musicians and critics who sometimes over the radio speak with blithe nonchalance about, I don't know, Monteuse, Symphonie Fantastique, and Ansermes and Toscaninis and so on. I am afraid they don't devote the time and the intensity that such comparisons should have. Don't you agree?
Yes, I do.
Because to listen to a work of 35 minutes duration and to remember while you are listening to the fourth or sixth or eighth performance how you were struck by the first is a very responsible and important analytical job. And I just don't know how they do it. Anyway, when I recorded the two Prokofiev sonatas, which I was the first to play in America, I got the Soviet recordings of those two sonatas, and I wanted, of course, to evaluate the two against each other. It took me hours, because I did it in little chunks of music and went back to the other performance.
May I ask you for a record that you still like of your early days, perhaps one of the pre-war records? Did you have a favorite?
Well, I'm very partial to the recordings I made with Sir Thomas. That was in 32, 3, 4. As you know, I made a recording of the Mendelssohn Concerto and the first Prokofiev concerto in those days with his orchestra.
I was always rather surprised that he did do the Prokofiev with you, because on the whole it's not his kind of
It
music.
is not his, and I remember going to his house around 11 o'clock in the morning to show him the piece. He never heard it. And I found him in a dressing gown with all his, the morning's mail just plastered out over the piano, and with a highball in his hand. And he asked me to go through it, because I, in a way, had to explain some things in that piece to him. I had a great experience of playing it. I was the first violinist to play it in Soviet Russia in 1924. And Oistrach, lately, when he was at my house in California, when I still lived in California, told me that he heard it from me for the first time.